It's 11:34 a.m. Also wanted to make note at the beginning of the meeting that the Teams chat is not a part of the official record. So if you do type something in the chat, please speak it into the record as well so that we have a complete record of the meeting. Next on the agenda, the land acknowledgement statement. The land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and the land. I'd like to acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded land of the Dena'ina people and thank them for their past, present, and future stewardship of the land on which we live. And then if we can move on to a roll call.
Dr. Harvey.
Present.
Here.
Mike Edgington.
Present.
Eric Riegel. Howard Helzer.
Present.
Carla McConnell.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Mark Lincoln.
Present.
And Ian Mills.
Here.
And next thing on the agenda, if we could entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve. Second. Second.
Hearing no objection, the agenda is approved as written. Next is the chair's report. I guess the biggest thing is we have two new members, Mike Edgington, Ian Mills. Maybe in a second we could introduce yourselves to the rest of the membership. And we also lost one member, Carmela Warfield. So we're doing a little bit of turnover, but if you guys don't mind, maybe just introducing yourselves.
Yeah, my name is Ian Mills. I work as a research and data manager at the University of Alaska Center for Economic Development. I think most of you know Nolan Cloud. I worked with him before he took his role with the mayor's office. So looking forward to participating and being here.
My name is Mike Edgington. I'm a day job. I'm a data scientist, data engineer, similar to Ian. And I'm also I've been on the Goodwood Board of Supervisors for 7 years as well. So I've sort of seen it from the other side.
Great, thank you guys. Yeah, and I think we're glad to have new people because we struggle a little bit with getting quorum sometimes. So I'm glad you guys are here, and also new hope means engaged. I know Mike, you and I have engaged on the Girdwood Board of Supervisors together. I know you're good at kind of getting in the technical details of things, but I guess other than that, really just an overview of the agenda from my side of things is the bulk of what we had today was quote unquote strategic planning, but really that's one of the things that we've talked about as a commission is trying to get a little bit more active with writing resolutions, especially with the budget process kind of in the middle of the budget process right now. And then Project Anchorage, the sales tax proposal that's out there. ASD is doing, right sizing. So really just one of the biggest things we wanted to do today was just kind of maybe get new members up to speed and talk about if there's anything of the few outstanding things that are there that we want to maybe talk about writing a resolution on, maybe request a list of questions and answers from OMB or whoever we want to, AEDC if it's about Project Anchorage or things. So that's kind of the bulk of what we had today was really just to discuss what we want to do and also maybe what we want to look forward to in the next few months. But that's really my whole report. We could move to the mayor's office report.
Well, this is Bill Palsy. I'll come off mute to ask who we're expecting to give the mayor's office report. I was not told by the mayor's office to provide a report to all of you. Who is that usually designated for? In
the recent months, we've had Nolan Clouda in to give the mayor's office report. But if you're not prepared to, if you weren't told you had to prepare anything, that's totally understandable. We can move on to the assembly report.
He may be en route from an offsite meeting.
Okay. We can circle back to this one, see if Nolan is on his way. I know he normally is pretty packed with meetings. It's happened the last few months as well. So that's not a problem.
Good. If Nolan does not return by the end of the meeting, I'll give you an extemporaneous update on the status of the budget and the substitute version, which is currently wending its way towards the next assembly agenda.
I appreciate that. Thank you. For the assembly update, I know I had Assembly Member Brawley and Assembly Member Zalatel reach out and say that they would have to miss the Budget Commission this month. They're both on temporary leave right now. but they did provide a brief report saying, I'll just read it. She said, I think the OMB will speak to the budget process and policy choices and the substitute version since it's soon before the vote to approve on the 19th. I would add that we had our assembly work session on amendments at the time of the email this morning. The amendment packet is online. The expectation is that OMB will incorporate at least some of these into the S version, but others would still be run by members if they aren't included in the S version. It's also possible to do last minute amendments on the 19th on the dais, but with a greater risk they won't pass because they weren't discussed in the working sessions. So the packet presented at that time gives a good idea, but there's more to unfold in the next week plus in terms of what's next with the budget. Moving on to the Anchorage School District report.
I believe Member Lessons is online, so I'll let her take it.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, things are busy at the school district and among board members these days. I'd like to begin this update though with just a reminder of, what is our why? What are we here for? And fundamentally, the role of the school district and your elected school board is to work together to improve our student outcomes. And, to that end, we regularly have a cycle of goal monitoring, and we have specific measurable goals that we've refined within the last year for our third grade reading proficiency rates, our 8th grade math proficiency rates, and are essentially at the high school graduation rate at this point in time. And so at our upcoming board meeting, one of the things we'll be doing is reviewing the 2024, the most recent version of our third grade reading proficiency data. And we get that for the district as a whole, and it's also disaggregated by different sort of different groups of students. And that data is also further available. You can look at individual schools, you can look at grades within individual schools on DEED's own website. And so the point of that is that as we consider, why am I saying this to the Budget Advisory Committee? Well, I think that there needs to be a continued reminder that how we allocate our funds matters. And to that end, I just wanted to note that in early October, the board refined one of our board policies to specifically indicate that the board expected the administration to align district resources to move those goals forward. So although we have a world of limited resources, we want to make sure as we move forward together that we are fundamentally supporting the community's desire to see our kids literate and numerate and graduate. So I think that's really important. The major things that the community is increasingly aware of is I think our march towards December 17th, which will be the second board meeting in December when a number of votes are going to take place. Top of mind for many people is this right sizing conversation. And about a week and a little under 2 weeks ago, the superintendent and the administration prepared and released a list of 7 schools, which after their analysis, they are recommending that the board consider for closure over a 3-year period. And just to pull that together here, their recommendation is that year 1, so at the end of this current school year, Bear Valley Elementary would be permanently closed. Its students would be relocated to Huffman, Rabbit Creek, and O'Malley. That Lake Hood Elementary be closed and its facility repurposed for a charter school, and its current students moved to Turnagain Elementary and Northwood Elementary. That Tudor Elementary be closed and its facility be repurposed for the Whaley School, and its elementary students moved to on the Montessori side over to Denali Montessori, and on the neighborhood side to Lake Otis Elementary. So that's all year 1. Year 2 would be Fire Lake students whose facility would be repurposed for a charter school. Its students moved to Birchwood, Eagle River, and Chugiak Elementary Schools. Nunaka Valley, which would be repurposed for a special program, quite likely sort of like a preschool hub. And its students moved to Chester Valley and Russian Jack. Wonder Park Elementary, which is would be permanently closed. Its students would move to Willowa and Ptarmigan Elementary schools. And then Baxter Elementary would be the sole, in the administration's proposal, the sole school proposed to be closed in year 3, and its facility would be repurposed for a charter school. Its students going to Chester Valley, College Gate, and Scenic Park. So understandably, this would impact many, many families across the district. There have, this week, the administration has started hosting conversations. The first one was up at Chudiak High School on Tuesday. Last night at the ASD Education Center, the Multicultural Education Advisory Committee and the Special Education Advisory Committee met. Tonight, there's a community conversation at Diamond High School. Saturday, there's a conversation at Bartlett High School. That's about from noon to 2, I believe. And then Monday, there will be 2 virtual conversations. One is around noonish, and the other one is in the evening about 6 o'clock. And the asdk12.org/right-sizing webpage is going to have all of the specifics. So just in terms of process, again, the administration has made the recommendation. It used a rubric to narrow sort of the field of all potential schools down to those 7 schools. And the board is expected to vote on that recommendation at the December 17th meeting. After, first it would be a non-action item, I think December 3rd or 4th is that the first meeting of the month, then it becomes an action item. The second major thing I expect the board to vote on in December is a likely recommendation from the administration to pivot high schools to a 7-period schedule. Currently, high school students take 6 periods in a semester. With the board's adoption of the Academies of Anchorage Master Plan back in June, part of that master plan effectively said we can't increase our career technical education opportunities under the existing 6-period per day framework. We need to have an additional time in the day, an additional course in which this would happen. And so the administration sent out a survey earlier this fall asking community members for input on 7 or 8 periods, and the community responding to that survey seemed to indicate a much stronger preference for the 7-period schedule, although there was certainly a lot of pushback in the written comments saying, I don't want to change at all. Why don't you have an option for a 6-period schedule? So I did want to just respond to that and say, well, there wasn't a 6-period option because you can't move forward with the academies and keep the status quo schedule. So that's why 7 or 8 periods was a choice. So anyways, the board needs to, I expect the board to vote on that at that December 17th meeting. In addition, I expect that that's the meeting where the board will approve its pro forma for the FY26, so the the 25-26 school year. So in short, I'm not getting home early on any school board meeting nights between now and the end of December. We are certainly hearing a lot from members of the community. You know, public input is important, it's valid, and I would encourage people to weigh in as they feel so moved. And I'll let Katie Parrott sort of fill in the details.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Katie, go ahead, and then I see Carla has.
Katie Parrott, I'm the Senior Director of the Office of Management and Budget for ASD. Nice to meet you. I don't know if we've met yet, but I've met Mike. So do you want to take the question first, just in case it was for member lessons?
Yeah, sure. Carla, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, you kind of ended your report with a little bit of an answer, but the question would be, are you required by any statute or anything within your bylaws at ASD to actually have public input on these closures? Or is this just a good faith thing?
That's a great question. We have every board meeting has opportunities for community members to weigh in on either action items. So if we're voting on, I like to talk about, Taco Tuesdays. If we were to vote on a Taco Tuesday recommendation by the administration, community members could share their public testimony in support or opposition to that recommendation. But even if that were not a specific item that the board was voting on, community members are always welcome to share their testimony, their input on really anything ASD. So I think, I don't have a specific answer, but I think public input is always welcome. But I think especially given the gravity and the effects that these school closures and consolidations would have, as an individual board member, I find that I'm learning a great deal from public testimony, and I would encourage people to weigh in on that. So I don't know if there's any state statute requiring the district to accept that, but it is certainly a practice that is part of how the ASD is being run.
Well, let me further ask then, if all public input, if you run the numbers, and I know we're going to hear from OMB, but if you run the numbers and it really makes sense to shutter these schools, and all public input is, please don't, please don't, please don't, what is going to be your priority in the end? Because now you've opened it up for people to say, I begged them not to, and they did it anyway. See what I mean? So I'm just wondering, what is your priority? Is it going to be public opinion on whether they should be open or shut, or is it going to come down to dollars and cents?
That's a great question. I think, and I'll let Ms. Parrott respond as well. One of the lessons that it seems as though the district has learned over the past couple of years is that it doesn't necessarily come down to dollars and cents. What the district has been sharing in its right sizing sessions repeatedly is that the right sizing conversation is, at the end of the day, needs to be about the ways in which we're going to deliver education services to students better. So there are some schools which are extremely small and as a result have one teacher per grade or even less. And what happens in that case is that you end up with these combo classes. There are some educational philosophies where maybe it's great and ideal for students to cycle through the same teacher in a multi-year pattern. Montessori comes to mind. But I can tell you, as the parent of a current fourth grader who was in a 3-4 combo class last year, it's very challenging for a teacher to teach his or her third graders and his or her fourth graders in grade level appropriate, material and content and standards at the same time. And so, and also, when we have increasing populations of students with, qualifying for special education, if we have specialists who, are at school A 2 days of the week and school B 3 days of the week, it may not serve the full population of students who need those services as effectively as if that specialist were available all the time. So by consolidating schools, the administration has shared, we can have multiple classrooms in let's say grade 3 rather than just one or an awkward split. And so at the end of the day, it believes that students are going to be better served. And this is where I'm going to lean on Katie as well. Given the state's funding formula, we may actually lose dollars to some extent at the end of the day when we create schools with greater enrollment. We get more funding for small schools than we do in big schools. And at the extreme, we get students in our high schools, which are, West High School has something like 1,700 students and change. They're like less than a full student in the state's funding formula because it expects to see efficiencies of scale. I don't know. Does that help?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I mean, once again, when you ask for public opinion, when you open yourself up for all of these touchy-feely sessions, then you open yourself up for people to be really angry when you shut it down due to dollars and cents, because then they feel like they were not heard. So I guess in the case, that's why I was asking if you were required to go to the public, because it seems to me it would be better just to announce, hey, we don't have enough students, we can't keep these schools open, and this is the route we have to go. They're still going to be angry, but at least they're not going to think you, yeah, you know what I mean. I was just seeing if there was some type of statute that said that you had to go to the public and get their opinion on this. But thank you for all the answers. I appreciate that.
So maybe we'll get into kind of the technicals of maybe the fiscal impact of the right sizing program, but I saw Mark had a question.
Yeah. Thank you. Just real quick, I really appreciate you starting with the why and talking about those goals. My question is, are those metrics available and as well as are the results also being posted?
Yeah, I believe, Kelly, I can take this one. And I was going to mention this for the good of the order too. I can actually forward you some of the links that have been provided in presentations that have been made specific to right sizing, particularly the work session presentation that was given this past week to the school board. I believe I had provided with some of the information for the BAC. So you might have some of those prior links for right sizing in attached with some of the historic information for your meetings here based on what I provided previously. But I can also make sure that I send those links directly to the new members, and I'll include you as well.
Yeah.
So some of that information is available, publicly.
Yeah, what I'm talking about is the actual outcomes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And those,
Yeah,
that is a great question. So so for example, this coming Tuesday, we're going to be discussing the reading data. So that we received the report that was, it is linked to the previous meeting, and it will be linked to this upcoming meeting. In addition, I will have to get the actual URL, but I'll do that in just a second and put it in the chat. All of our goals and guardrails and the reports that the administration generates are put together in one central hub. So those are available. But again, this is all coming from DEED's own website. So it's all publicly available through DEED as well. And just if I can briefly share, we have a remarkable district. It is big and it's diverse and it spreads across 2,000 square miles. We're monitoring a number for the district as a whole, but there are major disparities between subgroups of students. And I think it's important to keep in mind that there are also, pockets of excellence in any given school and any given grade. And what's important is that we align our practices to really move the entire district forward. But when I see, and I'll be frank, when I see a 30-point spread between our economically disadvantaged students and our students who are not economically disadvantaged in third grade, and when I see that spread pretty stagnant through the rest of the state data going up through grade 9, that tells me we have a really big problem in how we're resourcing our highest risk students. What do we need to do to direct additional resources? Because at the end of the day, these are other people's babies. Our job is to make sure they can become really functional adults in the world that we're all going to share, and how can we best align our resources to get the outcomes that I think we all want to see. So we need to understand what the gaps are and understand how we can backfill. And that's, I'm just going to say it, and that is one of the main reasons why an inflation adjusted base student allocation is absolutely critical. At our last ASD Finance Committee meeting, we reviewed a recent memo from Legislative Finance, which noted that between the start of the 2010-2011 school year, so that's FY11, that's the year that the class of 2023 enrolled in kindergarten, and FY24, which was last year, the value of a dollar in FY11 now requires $1.33. And that means that our purchasing power has declined precipitously as the state has failed to adjust the base student allocation with inflation. So the district has closed schools, it's promoted, it's reduced programmatic services, it's increased our pupil to teacher ratios by about 10% on average since the 2016-17 school year. And we still are confronting a massive deficit that we're going to be talking about more with our FY26 scenario. So I'm not sure, quite frankly, how we're going to improve the outcomes of all students, but especially our highest risk students in the scenario where we continue to be starved for funding.
So maybe if you could send that to Aaron can forward it to the commission as a whole, maybe the right sizing website and the performance metrics site again. And then I kind of want to move on to the mayor's office and OMB, but just real quick, I mean, we mentioned the foundation funding formula as the BSA, adjusted average daily membership, so average daily membership, and the school size factor, which it sounds like that would be changing under a right sizing plan. And I don't know if charter schools are counted in like the correspondence factor, or where if charter schools contribute to the BSA or to the foundation funding formula at all. But do we know kind of the fiscal impact, at least a high level estimate?
Yes, high level estimates. So when there is a school closure, there is a corresponding reduction of revenue because each individual school based on their size is provided a multiplier based on the school size that does provide, in some cases, additional revenue. So that is factored in. However, there is a part of the statute for the funding formula includes a school consolidation hold harmless. So essentially for a period of a few years, very similar to the enrollment decline hold harmless, there is a provision that adds back some of that lost ADM or some of that lost revenue in a way that helps smooth the fiscal impacts, right? So I think that the thing to keep in mind is, and I know that the Muni deals with this as well, is the workforce, staffing shortages, vacancies. The district is spread very, very thin, and in some areas in a way that makes it difficult to provide the kinds of quality services that we know are best for kids. So one of the things to keep in mind, as Ms. Lessons had mentioned, is how we're providing those services with effectiveness and efficiency, right? So in a cost effective, in my opinion, also goes to what kind of service is being provided for the money that's being, put out there, right? And so when you have a scenario in which an itinerant special services provider is having to go to 3 individual schools to service students, and then let's say a student is sick on a Monday and that was their one shot in that week to be provided that service that they really need, but we only have enough staff or to spread across so many buildings, that's a loss of service for kids, and in my opinion, not always cost effective. And so those are some of the things to factor in that have been factored into making those recommendations and taking a look at the footprint and how we can staff and provide programs and services most effectively. So going back to the funding formula, Charter schools are, it's in statute that charter schools are provided their appropriation very similarly to how the district is provided their appropriation based on a pro rata share for their students with a couple of modifiers, right? So the district is allowed to deduct up to 4% for indirect costs, which essentially is just all of those services that are provided in terms of HR, payroll processing, finance and accounting, all of the kind of administrative functions that are kind of given to charter schools to help them be a part of the district as a whole. So they are provided that funding as a pass-through, but their students and their enrollment is factored into the foundation formula money that is provided to the district as a whole. Those are kind of a couple of things to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that there is the hold harmless for an enrollment decline that kicks in at a certain level, but the school consolidation hold harmless and the overall enrollment hold harmless cannot both be active at the same time. So the district will make the decision whether or not which one under what scenarios will be most advantageous to the district in terms of funding. And we've done that in the past when through the pandemic, there was the enrollment dip, but then there was also the closure of Abbott Loop at the same time. And so we did end up selecting the hold harmless that was most advantageous to the district, which this would be a similar scenario. We'd do the same thing.
And those step down after 3 or 5 years?
3, yeah. And there's different calculations for the level of step down, but essentially it's a 75%, 50%, and then 25% in the last year. And so I hope that answers.
Yeah, and some of the schools, if they're going to be turned into charter facilities, that kind of the assumption is that you'd increase the possible charter school, population, but that wouldn't directly reduce ADM of ASD.
No.
Okay. All right.
No. That still goes to the overall ADM for the district. Yeah.
Okay, Al.
What I take a look at is I take a look at the expenses,
Mm-hmm.
and then I take a look at the proficiency results,
Mm-hmm.
and that's my concern.
Yes.
Years ago when my kids first went to school here, we were in the top 5,
Mm-hmm.
and now I don't know where we're at, but I think from a business perspective, this is what we're spending,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we are producing.
Yeah.
And that's got to change.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly, I think, where the board is as well, and the administration is, and that's part of the taking a look at the right sizing as well, because when you have teachers and staff who are spread too thin and they're not able to provide the same level of quality, perhaps. But we do also have anecdotal evidence of how making those targeted investments are moving the needle on proficiency. So for example, with the rollout of the Alaska Reads Act, the district had to make some of those hard decisions because that was largely an unfunded mandate from the state of Alaska. But one of the goals of the board is reading proficiency and really attacking that. So we knew that we had to direct funding to be able to kind of to fidelity follow that model in order to, get at reading proficiency. The district set aside, I think it was about 2.7 million, maybe a little bit more at the end of the day, for setting that up and implementing those strategies. And then the first reports that came out that crossed that school year showed that the K through 1, Kelly can correct me if I'm wrong, but K through 1, the proficiency rate rose 10%. 10%. That was a targeted investment in strategies that cost money, but something that we did and were committed to doing and moved around resources and made difficult decisions in order to do it, that ended up proving that strategy works. So I think that that's something that the board is going to continue looking at and doing and making those decisions according to the goals that they've set forward, including balancing out the, public comment and testimony through this process. So although there's not a specific individual set aside statute related to school closure or school consolidation, the board has an obligation through the Open Meetings Act to take that public comment on any actions that they're taking. I think it could be argued that those that are really substantial in changing an entire neighborhood or changing a system that impacts so many families, you know, they'd want to provide more opportunity to seek that in multiple different ways. But I think at the end of the day, the board is going to, as elected officials, they're going to weigh that feedback with what they know, with the information they have as the elected leaders, and then make a decision for the district. You know, that's how I foresee that process going.
Thanks, guys. Maybe move on to the mayor's office. I'm a little bit lax on the time blocking today because so much of it is just kind of BAC's discussion time. So hopefully that's okay with everybody.
I do have one more very brief update because it's so relevant to the relationship between the district and how it's funded by the municipal appropriation. Previously, I had reported about the proposed regulations change related to what is defined as a local contribution, which could disallow some of the support that the muni has been able to provide to the district. And the update to that would be that based on feedback that has been provided to DEED, they're postponing that proposed regulation process so that at the very earliest that wouldn't go into effect until FY27. So for right now, the district is kicking off our FY26 budget development process. And so that's one thing that we won't have to worry about for this current cycle. So that's good news. That's a relief.
And we
don't
fund up to the maximum local contribution in ASC, or are we all the way up to?
So no, because of the one-time funding that comes through fairly late that raises that level, right? Related to the state cap, right? So, but yes, so a lot of the times though, we're not able to submit a budget request that takes into account later funding that comes through. So it's very likely that, you know, our budget request at the time that we submit that is getting very close to the cap, if not hitting it. But at the end of the day, when it all settles out, usually that cap is raised. So we're not funded to that level because of the one-time supplemental appropriations that are made late in session.
Great, thank you. Nolan, move on, so go back to the mayor's office, update on the agenda. Appreciate your patience.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Nolan Claudio with the Mayor's Office Policy Director, and I'll give you guys some updates from the Mayor's Office, and happy to take any questions, even if it's not one of the topics I mentioned. Feel free to jump in, and I'll do my best to answer. But one thing I'll kind of lead with is that I've been working on our legislative program, which is going to the Assembly next week. So this is the municipalities' kind of asks of the state legislature in time for the legislative session. And we came away with this. So this is going to the Assembly next week for introduction, and then it'll be passed in December. And we have 3 top priorities in the legislative program as it exists now. Could be amended through the process. But one is snow removal. We're talking about, because of how many of our roads are state roads, we are putting a lot of effort into municipal snow response. This is one of the mayor's top priorities. We're definitely putting all effort that we can. We hope that the state does the same. I think it's something that when a lot of our key roads, of course, are state managed roads, and when roads aren't plowed, people don't tend to know the difference between whether it's a state road or a municipal road. But we're trying to do our best. We want the state to make sure that they're doing their best as well too on snow removal. So ensuring that snow removal is adequately funded through DOT on all those state roads is something that's really important to us. Second priority for us is standing up crisis behavioral health services, the Crisis Now model. This is a big factor for us that relates to the use of public safety resources often to deal with behavioral health crises. Some of this is connected to people experiencing homelessness, but it's not an identical issue. So there's an importance in kind of standing up a few key pieces of legislation that would allow crisis behavioral health services to be fully functional. And then our third priority, actually, in solidarity with the school district, is going to be increasing the base tune allocation. Something that is that we feel is very important to the municipality, and something that the mayor plans to add her voice advocacy for, something that's very critical to the city. But also in there, we have a lot about housing, energy, actually too. We're very concerned about the energy issues in Cook Inlet. And even though the municipality doesn't control any production of natural gas, we do have a voice to lend to that as far as things like transmission upgrades, hydroelectric expansions, and other efforts too. And then another piece is the Port of Alaska. So we have an ask of the state that is focused more on being a partner to us in funding the Port of Alaska modernization program. So that is that's an effort that I want to also give a little bit of an update on. We've just come up with a plan of finance. Mr. Falsey on the line has been very instrumental in that. So the overall port modernization program is about $1.9 billion of effort that has to go into that, and some of that's already been awarded and worked on. But the overall project is quite large to replace all those cargo terminals and shore stabilization, a few other pieces of that. But the plan of finance hinges on surcharges on the cargo that moves through the port, and those surcharges service revenue bonds that are used to pay for the bulk of it. Now, when we get additional funding from the state and federal sources, that offsets those surcharges, reduces them. The surcharges are something that every item that you buy at the grocery store, is going to have that built into their price. And this is not just for Anchorage, but this is for, a very large share of the state, that receives goods through the port. So the ask that we have is any support that we can get from the state or from federal sources helps to reduce the need for those surcharges and reduces that impact that gets passed on throughout the state. Really awesome piece of news this week is that we received a $50 million grant from MARAD, from a federal agency toward the modernization project. So that's something that's really awesome news for us. And also that with this funding, we are able to fully utilize the $200 million that the state gave to the municipality, I think at FY23. That is now, $100 million of that was contingent on achieving, federal money to match it. And so this $50 million actually fills that last gap of, I think we have about $30 million to go in order to meet that match. So we feel like the port's really in good shape now as far as things like that go. And Mr. Falls and others have a lot to do with that. I think show a lot of leadership on this one. Homelessness continues to be a huge priority for the administration. We get a lot of comments about the impacts of visible homelessness, and sometimes this is merged into the public safety conversation. Not all of the public safety issues that people identify are caused by unhoused individuals, but this is a very interconnected type of an issue. And so we've got our congregate shelter, one of the non-congregates set up. And we're negotiating with the vendor for the final non-congregate shelter piece. Budget that the mayor introduced, it prioritizes homelessness to a significant degree, sheltering, rehousing, as well as abatement of camps too. And so we're definitely listening to the issues and the complaints that we hear, from the community about this. We're hearing from a lot of businesses getting impacts downtown, midtown in particular. And so we are definitely concerned about that. And also, along with this, strengthening the public safety response too. And there's a couple of pieces to that have been front of mind for us. One is prosecution. The prosecutorial function of the municipality has been understaffed and overwhelmed, I think, for the last few years. We've got a new lead prosecutor, and we've been staffing those vacancies. This has caused a lot of offenders to be able to walk away because of timeliness of trial. So that's an issue that has been a gap in our public safety, pipeline. So something that we're very committed to fixing and made a lot of progress on as well. Another piece in the mayor's budget is a fleet levy for snow removal equipment and for police vehicles. So a levy is voter approved effort. It goes on a ballot. You vote on just like you do with the bonds, but it doesn't go to bonds. It goes to authorizing an increase in the property tax cap for a very specific purpose. So it's a 3.5 in the release budget. It's $3.5 million for snow removal equipment. So this gets us new graders and new plows, new other pieces of equipment that we need, and then also $3 million for these vehicles. There's a large need, very large need there. Got vehicles 200,000 miles. This slows police responses and the overall public safety effectiveness. And so, so that's in the budget as well. On the subject of the budget too, we are working on S version. That's a substitute version of the budget. So we have our released version. There's fine tuning or changes that we see the need to make. This very, very standard thing. So we're going to be releasing an S version of that soon. Another thing, and one other thing I'll point out in the budget that's a new thing this year is that there was a voter approved proposition for marijuana taxes that are then included into childcare and early education. And so in the fiscal year 25 is the first year in which that becomes operational. So marijuana tax dollars going to support the childcare sector through a couple of different means. It comes out to about 5.5 or 6 million a year is likely what we will be expecting from that funding source, but it's all directed toward childcare early education. So it can't be used for general budget purposes. So we're very excited about that coming online in 2025. Snow removal, we have our snow solutions team. If anyone's seen the website, uni.org/snow, we put kind of centralized /plow. I think I just tried snow and it got me there, but I guess yeah, you're right. Plow, I think, is the advertised link. And so that's got a GIS information, and you can see who's getting plowed, which streets have been plowed, where it's going next, so forth. We're trying to really make sure that our communications on snow removal are as effective as they can be. But we are also looking at all making the kinds of operational improvements we can, equipment upgrades, staffing as well. The budget did include an increase for the operators as well. They were definitely below market and still are, but we're trying to get them a little bit closer so that we can retain folks and keep those positions filled. Other stuff we have going on. We have our something I've been actively working on a lot lately, our housing strategy, housing priorities that are coming out in the next few weeks. This is effort to build more homes in Anchorage. So that involves where we've got kind of 3 planks to that: incentivizing construction reuse, cutting red tape and policy barriers, and also improving the overall kind of customer service experience with the permit center and process improvements that go along with that. One piece that I'm really actively working on is property tax abatement for multifamily structures. So this is a reduction in property taxes for new construction of multifamily housing that fits certain requirements. So the baseline would be a 15-year elimination of the building property taxes, not the land, and for building 8 or more units. And then there's some additional features that could get you additional years of abatement if you meet those. So I think a key piece in meeting our housing goals. But I'll stop there, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
On that property tax abatement, who's gonna pick up the tab? If you give an abatement notice, who's going to pick up that difference?
Sure. Through the chairman, the way that this works is this has to be new construction. So we're not taking anything off that's currently taxed. We're not turning its taxes off. This is new improvements, and we're opting not to tax them for a period of time if they're multifamily housing. So it doesn't cause anyone else's taxes to go up. We're declining to add them to the property tax roll that which would distribute that revenue burden more widely, but it doesn't actually make anyone's taxes go up.
Okay. Another question is the city attorney's office. How are you tracking the aging of those cases?
I am not personally tracking. No, I'm kidding. I don't know the answer to how those are tracked. I'm very removed from how prosecution works exactly. I could try to get you information on that, but that's yeah. I don't know.
It seemed like to me that they should be able to produce a report when a case was filed or a crime was committed. They should be able to produce an aging factor. How many years? 2, 3, 4 years ago? And I think that would be important to get rid of your backlog to set up a program like that.
Right.
So that you got your fingers on it. You might just think about that, yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, we've got a really excellent, municipal prosecutor that we hired recently. Who used to be the municipal attorney, Dennis Wheeler, and so he, we put a lot of confidence in his ability to manage the flow of how cases are prosecuted. I think, so it's definitely something that we're concerned with.
I know the budget books have some performance metric information, so they might have some aging information in there. Maybe the Department of Law at the state level, I think, might also compile municipal statistics. But I don't know. Would you mind maybe just asking real quick and just an email to Aaron if there's anything like that?
Yeah, I can check on that. Yeah, the PBRs that OMB tracks, the performance measures that are in there, they likely track that. I just don't know offhand.
I might jump on to your first question now. I just don't really know how this works. If you have new construction, I know that with the tax cap, it's property taxes collected plus an inflation and population factor. But if you have new construction, is that so? Say you have a million in property taxes collected the previous year, and then you build $500,000 worth of new construction, taxable value of new construction. You still could only tax up to that. That would just kind of reduce property taxes at I guess muni wide, right? It's not like new construction's outside of the tax cap or anything. It's if you have a taxable value that due to new construction that's higher than population and inflation factor, then it just would reduce burden on everybody, I guess. I'm not sure if I'm being clear in what I'm asking.
I mean, I guess, yeah, it's, new value. I mean, that's part of the tax cap calculation is that, new value added, raises the tax cap, right? So it's like along with population and CPI.
Okay, so that is a factor in there.
Yeah, so it is. So it's
Actually, just following on to that same comment, I believe that's true for new construction. The interesting question is at the end of this 15 years of abatement, when suddenly all that property becomes on the roll. It's not new construction at that point. So I can see a situation potentially where we cause effectively a problem with tax cap calculations a number of years in the future, potentially. I'm not sure. I just had a couple of other questions. First of all, I really enjoyed your presentation in a lot more detail at the Community and Economic Development Committee about a week or so ago. So I know there was a lot more information about the property tax proposal there. So I recommend listening to that if anyone has the opportunity to. I had two other questions as well. One's very parochial. The levies for fleet, are they service area specific? So APD service area for the fleet levy and answer.
That's correct. Yeah, yes, that they are service area specific.
And my third question was, I think the mayor's office previously said they were interested in the Project Anchorage proposal, but it hadn't quite got to a concrete actual ordinance and detailed proposal at that point. Now we're getting closer to that point. Should we expect some statements from the mayor's office about the level of support they have for the specific proposal?
Sure. Yeah, through the chair, the Project Anchorage, our stance on Project Anchorage is still essentially a neutral stance. We're not supporting or opposing it. Now there's a work session right after this that I'm going to downstairs. I think they're going to reveal the projects that have been selected. So it's still something though where we feel that there's value in having the conversation play out about revenue, about diversifying revenue sources, about how we sort of invest in kind of assets that improve Anchorage as a city and quality of life. But we don't feel like we're ready to take a strong position on it, pro or con. I think it's still something that I think there's a discussion about it. There's a lot of complexity to it that has to sort of play out, and the discussion just needs to happen, I think, and that's what is happening.
So there are some mechanical issues, which I think is still somewhat unclear, like what would the mechanism be for the property tax rebate? Would it be a percentage? Would it be a change to area-wide mill rate, so it becomes a strongly negative mill rate? These sort of questions I'm unclear about, and I know when you do the calculations again, particularly for smaller service areas, that makes a lot of difference as to how these things come out. So I'm unclear at the moment about how decisions are being made on this project when some of the very fundamental mechanism questions which really impact what will happen are still very unclear. And may not be clear within the timescale that we're talking about decisions.
Right, and then through the chair, those are all the kinds of issues that have to be untangled.
Right.
Those are all the kinds of issues that have to be untangled. Our best kind of understanding from sort of a legal and technical standpoint, how you would do property tax reduction, using that portion of the sales tax, is that it actually has to come out of the ASD portion because, we have a patchwork of different service areas. So it would be basically swapping that part out on your tax bill, the ASD portion would be reduced by that percentage, and then that sales tax revenue goes to ASD. So you guys don't feel anything from it. But that's our best. That seems to be the most workable kind of way of doing it without having to re-engineer all the service areas.
Go ahead.
I had two comments. One was on the tax abatement for new construction. Depending on the mechanism used for the abatement, isn't it possible that the total taxable value in the muni would go up right away, and then the cap would go up, but then they're not paying the taxes for the 15-year period?
Yeah, and it is a really good question that, like, as we started talking about this, I was thinking that I don't actually know the specific answer, because you could be raising, because
Depends on how you assess it.
because I don't know if because if it's exempt property, I don't know that it increases the property tax cap when it's built. But I'm gonna have to get an answer, because it is that is a pretty specific and technical area. I don't know exactly how it works in that sense.
Yeah, because that is my question, kind of related to Al's point, is if it raises the assessed value, but the people who are receiving the abatements aren't paying for it, then it's just spreading it across the rest of the people who are paying property taxes to get up to that cap. Is that would be accurate, unless if it doesn't raise the total taxable value of the muni immediately, then they would get that abatement, that money that you just wouldn't receive that revenue, and it wouldn't be the dollars between the cap the prior year and the cap the year in which it's built. It wouldn't be covered by currently paying property tax.
Yeah, we got the assessor going to be at our next meeting.
Mhm.
So I think that'd be a real good chance for both of you, including him, to get these questions answered.
Sure. Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, and the assessor, Jackie Davis has been I talk to all the time, and it's been helpful in crafting this legislation. He would know the answer off the top of his head, and I just don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, my other question was about your comments on the port revenue bonds offset by funding. Has there been an estimate, and I apologize if this is old news, but has there been an estimate of the percent of the total bond issuance that goes towards issuing and administering the bonds? Because when you get $50 million from the feds, you're not just offsetting $50 million of bonds, you're offsetting more than that, because some of the cost of bond goes towards administrating bond.
Right. I don't know what percent of the bond is going to overhead administration. Of course, there's also a percent of overhead on federal grants.
Yeah.
So I don't know the specific answer to that. That might be the plan of finance that is either published now or is being published very soon, may contain that level of detail. It does give estimates for those surcharges and how they pass through. So it may have some.
Got that exemption.
Yeah, if that's published, or whenever it gets published, we should maybe, if we could get that distributed to the commission.
Included. Or is it subtracted?
And then maybe I'm sure it includes like a sensitivity analysis of if 500 million is received from the state and feds, what the surcharge revenue bond would be needed versus 200 million, what would be needed, kind of that sort of table.
I don't think that's in the plan of finance, but it is stuff that we looked at and assessed. Yeah. Because we understand, like, to get to a certain dollar value of bonds, it requires a surcharge of this amount, which passes through to consumers at this amount.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a theme for me today, but I was looking at the goals that got put out with the budget, and I really appreciate the fact that those were included. Couple questions related. Well, maybe one is a recommendation. I really really appreciate the maintenance operations goals that they developed. I mean, those are great, smart goals that that can be measured, that can be reported on very, very quickly and easily. So I guess I would commend other departments to take a look at those and maybe refine some of their goals to be more measurable, right? And then that leads to the second question is have we already started to develop metrics that will be reported on and so that we can see that the community is making progress in this advancement towards good government and the mayor's mission. Yeah.
Through the chair, and you're talking about broadly speaking throughout the municipality?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's partly an OMB question, I think, about how we're looking at those PDRs and how looking at what we track and how we track it. I think we are definitely concerned with metrics. All of our plans we come up with, we'd like to be able to produce metrics. We've also got the I team, the innovation team that's helping us track data on a lot of these areas, including on snow removal is very front of mind. So the metrics for snow removal are one of the areas where we probably got the most kind of dialed in progress.
Yeah, I know we were able to do that with the the goals we set at DOT way back when on that snow removal, right? Be able to show, we said we're going to have these priority roads, cleaned by, within 24 hours, and we could show the percentage, that we achieved on that type of thing, right? So again, those are great goals, and it'd be really good to be able to have those metrics available for the public to see.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. It's good feedback. I think that's I think this is a conversation. Something we're going to be working on too is that there are a lot of performance measures that are tracked through OMB. But that we don't we haven't made them into like as digestible dashboards or really gotten the information out there. But there's a lot of really important information in those, and they're well tracked. And I think we need to kind of utilize that better and continue to fine tune those.
Yeah, I think it'd really be great to provide demonstrate that goodwill between the the community and the public, right? And I think they would be very receptive to that.
Any other questions? Well, I'd like to thank you for the presentation. If we could do maybe OMB really quickly. We heard about the budget and substitute versions and stuff. So maybe if there's anything to talk about outside of that, or maybe that specifically, and then we can move on to kind of the BAC budget discussion, Project Anchorage discussion.
So my name is Erin Baker. I'm the admin officer for the Office of Management Budget. You can see our fearless leader is not here right now. The rest of the OMB staff is diligently working to get the specific docs for the S version on the next agenda, which is the 19th, I believe. So not only does OMB iron out the details of the budget, but they also prepare the documents that go in front of the assembly. So those should be on the next event. If there's any other questions, I can write them down and take them down.
Great. Maybe now we move on to just kind of the BAC discussion. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just ask a simple mechanical question? The S version, it will be clear where the differences are. Not going to use the normal markup.
Yes. Yeah. I want to say underlined and bold. I don't, but you'll be able to tell what it means.
Perfect. So maybe I can just go over at a high level the different, I think, things that we have to talk about now or in the future. We have the budget. Obviously, this is kind of a pressing thing. They're going to be acting on it fairly soon. Project Anchorage, this temporary sales tax proposal, we had a presentation on it in September. I had an assembly member email me asking if we were going to be doing a resolution on that. My response back to them was that we'd discuss it. But at the time of our presentation in September, we felt like we didn't have enough information about the mechanics of how the property tax reduction would be administered, and then also some of the tax cap implications and various things that we're told we're going to be worked. So, maybe one of the things that we could do today is talk about some of those, and then maybe have a formal request for information from AEDC or the assembly groups who are working on it.
And then maybe that is, what, constitutes that, right? That resolution, right? That, we really need to see that detail.
That's true. That's true as well. Yeah. And also during this part, feel free to speak up. And I don't want to totally run this part. So if there's anything you want to jump in on, just jump in. But that's true. We could do a resolution just saying these were the things we didn't feel like we had enough information on. And then if they come out with more, we could always do another resolution as well.
Just send them a letter, yeah.
Do a
One
letter.
thing that Ona mentioned to me before the meeting was perhaps for you guys to do a resolution for the Q1 revisions rather than right now. We'll have more information at that time to really have an impactful statement.
Mhm. Yeah, I know like last year we did a resolution and I think we had to do it during we did a special working session in which we kind of talked about the specifics of the resolution. But that one, it seemed like there was a few more clear differences between the assembly and the mayor's office at that time, specifically around, I know vacancy rates was one that was talked about, and then kind of alignment with goals and ensuring that you're allocating resources aligned with your goals. This one, to be honest, I know there was only a few major changes, that the marijuana tax changes, which, I personally, I didn't have a ton of stuff to comment on with regards to that. I know that there was some kind of technical administrative changes that I think are going to be kind of not fixed, but changed back to align with the intent in the S version, is my understanding. And then some of the police funding and M&O or O&M funding that's in there. So I know there wasn't any of those major things that I had, unless there's things that people saw in there. And I wouldn't expect you guys right away to have jumped into it, but I guess I didn't have anything, so I would be open to doing the Q1 revisions as a resolution rather than the S version.
Maybe we could have just a special meeting to work on that.
Mhm.
You know, get rid of all the other stuff and let's go here.
You talking the Q1 revisions or the current the S version once it comes out?
Well, we could take a look at the current budget that they're proposing and the bond issues, and I think that we could come up with some good resolutions.
I think, maybe we could kind of look at scheduling a special meeting, just kind of, I think we could probably do it on Zoom, focused on, once the S version comes out, we get a chance to look at it. It'd probably have to be like next week, early next week, I think, but.
Do we know when Lance is coming? Is he not coming till January for this, to talk about the motor fuel tax?
That's one of the questions. What we want to do next meeting as well is I think we can either do Jack or Lance. So either do the gasoline tax, the user fee trust, or property tax changes and assessment methods.
I don't have them scheduled specifically yet, so whatever you guys plan to do, I'll set up.
I'll just offer that that's one that I'm pretty sensitive about, in the fact that we potentially wouldn't have to have a fleet vehicle levy if we were using our motor fuel tax the way it's supposed to be used, right? And so that's something that if we had an opportunity to discuss and hear from Lance, what the meeting's planning to do if there is changes to the way that they distribute those funds. I might propose a resolution based on that.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. That was the purpose of it, and we passed it, was to have that gasoline tax or gasoline user fee go into a segregated account. And that would be used to, pave streets and all those things.
Basically take care of our transportation system.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd be open to having that as the next meeting, and it's between that and the property tax changes and assessment methods.
I would definitely support the gas tax. It's something I haven't paid any attention to, and I do appreciate a better understanding of that. I think property tax, it makes sense to look at that next year. It's really the 25 assessment, the assessment process is happening.
That makes sense, and kind of aligning it with any legislation that's right. Proposed with the mayor's office. I think that's the best thing, as we hear what they're doing in the report. And
in terms of resolutions, I would definitely think that we would have to see the S version, because that's effectively what the administration is proposing. We're not going to see that until tomorrow, and there's a vote on it next Tuesday. So that gives us no time, basically. right? I would personally, I prefer to focus on some of these bigger picture issues like Project Anchorage in the short term, and then look at a resolution around the Q1 revisions for the 2025 budget.
I tend to
That's
agree.
better.
I think
it's wise.
Yeah. The S version kind of incorporates everything they talked about in the working sessions, and yeah, we can't see specifically what's there. So the Q1 revisions, that makes sense. And those come out around, is it March or February is when we start to see them? And
I don't know the exact date, but it is
around that time. Yeah, so I think that makes sense to me. And maybe rather than that working session, we can talk a little bit about Project Anchorage. I can draft up something for the commission to talk about at a working session, and we can do that and try to keep it pretty short. If we have something to talk about, then we can talk about changes. I can go back and make changes, and then we can circulate it via email.
I think the normal date for Project Anchorage is a vote as early as December 3rd. No earlier than that. So that gives us a little bit more time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'd like to perhaps we are talking about the strategic planning, but one thing that I'm noticing has come up quite a lot in the last year is discussions about revenue. We often focus on the spending side of it, but I think a broader discussion on revenue and the balance of different revenues would be a good thing to sort of think about as a bigger project across the next 12 months.
I found that there's 30 pages of revenue sources.
I think one thing that's really interesting with the Anchorage as well is how many tax districts and service areas we have, and I mean it affects the building codes in Eagle River down to the Girdwood, especially as a special case there. But I don't know. I kind of look at both of those things.
I think there are 72 service areas in code, although some of those have been abolished or are no longer active.
It's quite a few.
A lot.
Yeah, we don't have that many people.
Not a lot of special cases.
I guess another one just to bring up is we talked about OMB's processes, kind of process management, the ability to kind of produce management reports, and something that it's not something that I think is super pressing during budget season, but it's something that I just wanted to bring up as a topic that we've talked about probably every other meeting so far. But I don't really have much else, just to bring it up, keep it top of mind as something that we were discussing before. One thing that maybe is more of a question to OMB was, especially with the change from taking portions of the alcohol tax and moving them into the marijuana tax, was grant recipients, kind of a lack of clarity from grant recipients as to kind of the programs that would be within some of those line items that are in the budget. Is there any discussion that maybe we should have about grant transparency? I know you brought up auditing grantees, or maybe reports of prior grantees that fell under certain line items. That would be kind of a technical thing. I don't know if that's something that's worth bringing up.
It's our money.
So I don't necessarily know how OMB tracks that, or if it is tracked right now. Aaron, is there any kind of tracking of grant recipients that fall under certain line items that's public information?
nothing that OMB deals with that I know of. We publish reports, the use there for the alcohol tax budget versus actuals. But grants as a whole, publishing reports on that for OMB.
So maybe we, I guess it might be, we have a administrative officer in the mayor's office now. Maybe that would be who would, I know each department kind of does their own grant processes. But maybe it'd be just in the queue for a presentation type of topic, just to discuss maybe if there's any standardization of grant administration and tracking and ensuring that, as Al has brought up many times, the value for grants is being that we're realizing the benefits. Maybe it's a chief procurement officer, or somebody like that, but I don't know, just to throw in the queue as a
Be
topic.
nice to discuss, yeah.
I mean, it's the same discussion as the school discussion, right? I mean, we have outcomes that are the result of the spending.
Mhm.
And, again, if we've got myriad of grant recipients, what's the outcomes that these funds are going or producing?
And yeah, I guess, and government also just at a state, local, federal level procurement, writing contracts and grants is such a big part of the budget. It makes sense to me to talk about that.
I do want to state on the topic of grants that with the 2025 budget, Mr. Falsey is taking on a role as the Chief Administrative Officer. And underneath him, there is a position made for grants acquisition or something to that extent. So that might be the person who ends up being involved in the reporting on grants.
Okay, yeah, it'd be good to kind of probably see I know we talked about there would be like a new federal capture group to be like, how do we kind of reorganize ourselves or make sure we're optimizing our budget to optimize federal capture grants. And then there should be kind of the intake and the output side, I think. But we'll throw it in the queue, I think, for a presentation, and then talk about that more in the future. But it sounds like we have that as a possible presentation. We'll do gasoline. We'll have Lance Wilbur come in and talk about the gasoline tax next meeting. We'll wait on not commenting on the S version, comment on Q1 revisions to the budget. But I still recommend everybody look at the S version, just get well up on it. I know, like you're saying with the goals and objectives, the overview of the budget that was released this year was, I thought, really, really helpful. And then kind of no action right now with the ASD Foundation funding formula. I know the BSA is one topic there, but also like district cost factors. And sorry, I pointed you, I know ICER did district cost factors like 10 years ago or something like that. So district cost factors. Oh, okay. So your seat. Yeah, SEDS. Okay. So
We work with ICER, but we're not them.
okay, that is good to know. Sorry about that. But I know like district cost factors has been school size.
Can we step in for a second?
Yeah.
The gentleman in the yellow sweater, do you drive a red Subaru?
I do, yes.
Okay.
In one place.
Sorry to bother you guys again. Your car was backed up into. So, the pictures and the video downstairs.
Thank you.
Sorry, you guys, thank you.
Bummer.
Yeah.
So if you give a parking downtown.
You already.
You should have taken the house for good.
Sorry, Mike.
Another times.
But Project Anchorage, I guess, is the closest thing that we have to an action. Just so real briefly, I can draft up a possible resolution, which is going to be fairly high level, and it's going to be mostly talking about the information that we hope to have, don't have, or that we do have and have an opinion on. So I'll kind of put a skeleton framework together. It'll just be a first draft, so feel free to critique it, add to it.
Back from it to us, and we can give you some edits.
And then
changes or something.
we'll try to schedule a working session. Ideally, next week I'll be out like the second half of like the last week, really like 8 days of November for Thanksgiving. So if we could do it sometime before then, that'd be ideal for me. But hopefully we could find a time that works for everybody, and I'll get that resolution.
I'm pretty open.
Pretty quick.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of our actions. If there's any other input.
It's good.
I will let the commission know as soon as the S version is published online.
Awesome. Thank you. Otherwise, I want to. I know we have audience participation on here, so we kind of jumped around on the agenda a little bit. That's my fault. But if there's anybody online who wants to unmute and provide input to the commission, I think now would be the time.
I move to adjourn.
I think we can entertain that motion. Should we have a second?
Second.
All right. Hearing that, we're adjourned at 12:53 p.m.
Thank you. Good. Nice job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carla.
Good meeting there.
Good meeting.
Yeah, it was good. I think it was good. I was kind of purposefully